Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. In a small, peaceful town in Colorado, nestled between snow-capped mountain Sandemann's pine forests, Emily Carter, 26, had found refuge from the tumult that had shaped her youth. Denver, her hometown, had seen her grow up in material comfort but emotional emptiness. The only child of a real estate tycoon, she had grown up in overly shiny salons, with overly polite smiles, at parties where everything was negotiable, even love. She had learned at a young age to smile when she was smothered, to walk in heels too high to escape a life already written for her. She had fled. Not violently, but silently. She had settled in Willow Creek, a small town where people greeted each other by their first names, where cafes still served homemade bread, and where sunsets tinted the windows of houses with copper and gold. There, she worked as assistant at a local art gallery, helping to hang works by forgotten artists, organizing small exhibitions in the hope of bringing this discreet but sincere place back to life. Far from her father's ambitions, she finally breathed, not through grandeur, but through simplicity. An afternoon of autumn, as the russet leaves danced on the road like golden confetti, Emily drove down a side road, humming softly to the beat of the radio. Her car, ale beige Chevrolet from 1974, dented but full of memories, it was her beloved grandmother's, emitted a hoarse moan, then coughed, before dying. The sudden silence, amidst the trees, was almost unreal. Emily rapped gently on the steering wheel, sighed, and got out. The smoke coming from the hood confirmed what she had feared. Luckily, a few hundred meters away, she saw a small rusty sign, Morrison Auto and Repair, since 1983. Driven by urgency and curiosity, she stepped forward. The garage was modest, but authentic. A smell of grease and warm gasoline hung in the air, mingled with that of burning wood, no doubt coming from the fireplace inside. Tools hung neatly on the wall. An old dog slept in the sun by the door, and quiet laughter escaped from a radio. And that's where she saw him for the first time. Jake Morrison. A man in his 30s, shirt rolled up, greasy overalls, his face slightly covered in soot and sweat, but with a clear, piercing, almost too deep for a simple mechanic. He looked up when he heard the door creak, wiped his hands on a rag, and walked over to her. His smile was simple, but unusually warm. He didn't look at her with condescension or surprise. Just with that honest kindness found in those who have nothing to prove. "Need a hand?" he asked in a deep, almost reassuring voice. Emily, caught between relief and a strange nervousness, nodded. "My car, it decided to die in the middle of the forest." Jake gave a slight, almost amused smirk. "She's not dead. She's calling for help. We'll see about that." It was the beginning of a series of involuntary meetings. Emily's Chevrolet seemed to develop a knack for breaking down whenever she hadn't seen Jake in too long. A noise here, a leak there. And every time, he was the one greeting her, rag in hand, calm gaze, soft voice. Each visit to the garage became less of a chore and more of a secret weight. Jake knew how to fix everything. He knew every car part like a doctor knows his patients' hearts. But he seemed incapable of fixing what was going on in hers. He remained mysterious, modest. He spoke little about himself. Just enough for her to become attached, not enough for her to understand. And this, in Emily, aroused not only curiosity, but also something much deeper, a feeling of quiet, almost irreversible attraction. She didn't yet know that this man, this humble mechanic, was not what he seemed. That he carried, beneath his stained overalls, a past far richer, and far more painful, than she could imagine. Emily, although intrigued, remained in his guard. Part of her wanted to let go, to give in to the peace she felt in Jake's presence. But another part, forged in the living rooms of Denver, her father's advice, the betrayals veiled under smiles, told her to be cautious. Jake was everything that his father would have despised without even trying to understand. A man of hands, not of the office. A man who wore stained shirts, not gold watches. A man who did not seek to possess a woman, but simply toed there, to listen. And it was precisely this detail that disarmed Emily, He really listened to her. Not like those men in Denver who waited their turn to speak. Not like those overconfident heirs who mistook her silences for flirting. Jake listened when she talked about painting, even though he knew nothing about it. He frowned when she talked about her insomnia, as if the problem affected him personally. He asked her. "And you, are you okay? Really okay?" And he waited. He was waiting for the real answer. He never tried to impress her. No speeches, no poses, no masks that he took her walking in the woods behind the town, where the pines opened onto hidden clearings. He invited her for coffee in a small shack run by a Jamaican widow who still made her own bread. He laughed with her over silly things, without trying to be witty. He sometimes gave her a rusty old bolt found in a car wreck, just because he said it reminded him of her laughter, a simple thing, but one that resonates for a long time. Little by little, Emily found herself wait for their meetings. To watch for the smell of grease as you walk past the garage. To smile when you receive a simple message. "There's a full moon tonight. Are you free?" And then there was that evening, one of those suspended evenings, outside of time. They had climbed onto the roof of the garage, where he kept 2 old camping chairs and a cooler filled with local beers. The sky was clear, a dark blue velvet studded with diamonds. The wind was gentle, almost timid, and the city lights formed a distant halo. They stood in silence for a long time, legs crossed, beers in hand. Emily felt her chest expand with a strange calm. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't searching for words. She had no need to seduce. She was right there, with someone who saw her, really. "You know, Jake," she said softly, breaking the silence, "I feel more like myself here in this city than I ever did in Denver." Jake didn't answer right away. He slowly turned his head towards her, then towards the stars. A slight smile played on his lips, almost melancholy. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who knew what it cost to be himself, and what you sometimes lose in becoming him. "I'm glad you found a place where you can breathe." He said nothing more. But Emily felt, for the first time, that there was something deeper, heavier, behind his calm. This silence was not empty. It was a wall, and behind that wall, there was a man hiding something. A past, perhaps. A truth he wasn't ready to reveal. Emily looked at him for a long time in the gloom, the moonlight sliding across his tired but dignified face. She felt a question rise in her, but she didn't ask it. Not yet. But she knew it that evening, this man was not what he seemed, and if she wanted to continue walking by his side, she was going to have to discover what this silence concealed. But despite the sweetness of their shared moments, Emily couldn't ignore the persistent whispers that she heard in the quiet alleys of Willow Creek, those phrases spoken in hushed tones in cafes, those sidelong glances exchanged as soon as she mentioned Jake. "Jake Morrison? That guy's definitely hiding something. No one lives like him without saying so much. I saw him one night, getting into a Mustang Shelby GT 500. A classic. Do you think a mechanic can afford that on his salary? He always pays in cash. Always. And never in small bills." She had wanted to brush those words aside. She had told herself that people like to exaggerate. That a discreet man easily becomes a legend. But the worry, slow and dull, settled in the pit of her stomach like a slow poison. Jake never spoke of his life before Willow Creek. Not a word about his parents. No photos. No old friends. Just a hazy, erased existence, as if had started from scratch. Emily tried to reason with herself. Maybe he was running away from something. A pain, a loss. But another voice, crueler, whispered to her. "What if he's been lying to you from the start?" She tried to ask him a few discreet questions, during a conversation about vintage cars. "And that Mustang, the one you keep behind the garage. How did you get it?" Jake hesitated slightly. A second. Maybe less. But it was enough. He shrugged. "Gift from an old friend. It hardly runs anymore. Just for fun, sometimes." But his gaze was fleeting. Emily decided to wait. To observe, and then one evening, the opportunity presented itself. She had left the gallery earlier, and as she walked past the garage, she saw Jake hastily putting away his tools. He wasn't wearing his usual overalls. He had a clean, well-pressed black shirt and dark leather boots. He locked the garage, looked around, then climbed into the Mustang parked behind the shop. The roar of the engine broke the evening quiet. Emily, her heart pounding, quietly started her own car and followed him at a distance. They drove along the back roads, leaving the city behind. The forest gave way to silent hills. After a good 20 minutes, Jake turned onto a private road, almost completely hidden by the trees. Emily turned off her headlights. She parked her car in the shadows, a good distance away, and continued on foot. And what she saw there struck down on the spot. At the end of the path stood a modern, huge house, with clean lines, all bay windows and black stone. The kind of architecture not found here, in this simple, rustic region. Sensors activated as he approached, illuminating the path with white light. The perfectly trimmed garden was silent, almost too perfect. Jake got out of the car and walked up the steps to the terrace. There, a man in dark gray suit, carrying a leather briefcase, was waiting for him. He looked like a financial advisor, or a lawyer. The exchange was brief but solemn. The man held out a cardboard folder to Jake. He read for a moment, nodded, and signed. Then they shook hands. Emily, hidden behind a cypress, struggled to catch his breath. His hands were shaking. Jake Morrison, the quiet mechanic, lived here? Who was this man in a suit? Why such a house? Why hide everything? Nothing, absolutely nothing, about the Jake she knew matched what she saw. She felt her heart clench. Had she fallen in love with a stranger? She stood there, frozen in the darkness, unable to move forward, unable to move back. Part of her wanted to run to him, to confront him. The other part wanted flee, before his heart was broken for good. But one thing was now certain, Jake Morrison wasn't just a mechanic. The day after, Emily hardly slept at all. Her thoughts were spinning like an engine running on idle. She saw the scene from the day before over and over again, the luxurious house, the man in the suit, the handshake, the documents. Nothing she thought she knew was true. Her heart was oscillating between anger and sadness, between the fear of having been deceived and the hope that there is an explanation. She arrived at the garage before it opened, 15 minutes earlier than usual. The sky was still tinged with midnight blue, and the air smelled of wet pine and rust. Jake was there, as always, concentrating on lifting a hood, a cup of black coffee beside him. But when he saw her, he understood immediately. He saw in his eyes that she knew. He put down the key he was holding, slowly dried his hands, and stood up, ready to face her. But Emily didn't give him time to speak. "You lied to me." His voice trembled slightly, but his gaze was firm. "You pretend to be a simple mechanic, Jake. You live in a millionaire's house. You entertain people in suits, guys with contracts and briefcases. You are not who you say you are. Who are you really?" Jake was silent for a long moment. He looked away, as if searching for words in the specks of oil on the ground. The atmosphere between them had become heavy, electric. The sound of early morning birds contrasted sharply with the weight of the moment. Then finally, he spoke. His voice was calm, measured, but each word seemed to weigh a ton. "You're right." He looked up at her, and this time he didn't hide. "I'm not what you think. Well, I was the founder of Morrison Motors, a company specializing in automotive innovation. Hybrid vehicles, next-generation combustion engines, green technology. We had it all. I built it with my brother. We started in an old shed in Chicago. We grew fast. Too fast." He paused for a moment, as if overcome by a painful memory. Then there was the accident. A conference in San Diego. It was raining heavily. My brother was driving our prototype. He died instantly. I had arrived the day before. I wasn't in the car. But it was like I was there. Emily felt her breath catch. Jake was staring at an invisible point, far away from them. After that, I lost my taste. Not just for business. For everything. I saw the shareholders fighting to get the company back before my brother was even buried. I saw the people, the friends, the opportunists, the journalists. They all wanted something from me. Not because I was Jake. But because I was Mr. Morrison. He took a slower, more painful breath. So I sold everything. My shares, my houses, my luxury cars, everything. I just kept this estate, away. And this Mustang. Because it belonged to my brother. I came here to disappear, to breathe, to become a normal man again. To work with my hands. To fix simple, tangible things. And he finally looked at her, deeply, without filter. And then you arrived. With your spontaneous laughter. Your meaningful silences. You wanted nothing from me. And I had never wanted anything more. So I didn't tell you anything. Not to lie to you. But to protect myself. A silence stretched between them, dense, fragile. Jake took a step towards her. I'm sorry. I should have told you the truth sooner. But I didn't want you to change the way you look at me. Because when you look at me, Emily, I feel like a man. Not a fortune. Not a past. Just me. He paused for a final moment. His voice barely cracked. And everything I am now, I owe a little to you. So yes, I ran away from the world. But I never ran away from you. I love you, Emily. And I'm ready to lose everything again. Except you. Emily, upset, left the garage without a word. Her steps led her through the still quiet streets of Willow Creek, but everything suddenly seemed foreign to him. The wind had changed. The colors seemed duller. She no longer heard the birds singing, nor the familiar sounds of the city. Just the buzzing in her head, that internal tension that she could no longer contain. She had expected betrayal, yes, but not in this form. It wasn't Jake's money that troubled her. It wasn't the modern house, or the successful business, or even the secret contracts. It was what all this revealed itself. She had been raised in a world where appearances were the absolute rule. Where one had to have the right name, display the right image, move in the right circles. A world where love was calculated, negotiated, and distrusted. In its original universe, no one hid their fortune. On the contrary, we put it on display. We shone to be seen. We seduced to control. And here she was meeting a man who had everything fled from this world. Who had voluntarily refused power, admiration, visible wealth, to become simple again. Human. True. She sat on a wooden bench near the old river bridge. The water slid slowly under the planks, like a soothing breath. Her thoughts were a mess, but a clear feeling was rising upon the surface. Jake had never cheated on her in his behavior. He hadn't played a role. He hadn't tried to seduce her with promises, or trap her in a lie. He had only wanted to be seen for what he was, and not for what he had been. She thought of his discreet gestures, his sincere laughter, the way he gazed at the stars in silence, as if searching for an answer that life no longer gave him. She thought of his greasy hands, his respectful silences, that modesty so rare in a man. And despite the turmoil within her, a certainty was taking root. She loved him. Not for his wealth, not for his past, but for his way of being. For the security she felt by his side. For the fact that he never tried to conquer her, but rather to welcome her. The real test came now. Could she trust him despite the initial lie? Could she, who had been shaped by a world of pretense, choose the truth of the heart? She waited for the sunset. She needed soft light to speak sincerely. Then, her heart pounding, she returned to the garage. It was closed, but she knew where it was, on the roof, where he always went when he wanted to be alone. She climbed the metal ladder, her hands sweating with nervousness. When she appeared at the edge of the roof, Jake was there, sitting cross-legged, staring up at the amber sky. He turned his head. When he saw her, his eyes opened, surprised, worried, vulnerable. Emily moved forward slowly, her eyes shining, but this time no tears. No clarity. You lied to me, Jake. He lowered his head. I know. But she raised her hand, gently. But not to manipulate me. You never used me. You never trapped me in a game. You did it to protect your heart. And I understand that. Because I, too, hid. Behind my choices, my silences, my escapes. I fled Denver to find someone who would see me as I am. And you did it. Without even knowing who I was. She walked over and knelt down in front of him. So I want to show you my heart too. Not the one I learned to control. The real one. A silence. Then she reached out to him. If you still want me, I'm here. Not for your past. Not for your fortune. Just for you. Jake looked at her for a long time, his eyes wet, but without shame. And in this shared silence, they found themselves again, but this time, without a mask, without fear, without shadow. 1 year later, the streets of Willow Creek had kept their outward calm, but something had changed. At the corner of Fifth Avenue, where once stood an abandoned warehouse, now stood a vibrant, living, unexpected place, the Garage of Souls, part mechanic's shop, part art gallery. A hand-painted sign fluttered gently in the wind, a mixture of brushstrokes and shards of metal. Inside, the sounds of wrenches and brushes rubbing the canvas mingled in a strange and soothing harmony. Jake, dressed in his black overalls, was working on a battered old Harley-Davidson, while Emily, her hair tied up in a messy bun, spread acrylics on a huge canvas, her fingers stained cobalt blue. At first glance, everything seemed to oppose their gestures, their worlds. But on closer inspection, there was in each of their movements the same precision, the same love of the material, of transformation, of rebirth. This place was not just their project. It was their offering to the world, a silent response to the wounds they had each carried on their own. Every Wednesday afternoon they opened their doors to disadvantaged youth in the region. Some came to learn how to disassemble an engine, others to paint their anger, their silence, or their dreams on a free canvas. Jake showed them how to bring damaged objects back to life, while Emily helped them add color where there was only gray. A boy who had run away found a taste of calm by sanding a bicycle frame. A girl broken by school became light again in front of an abstract painting. They never spoke of it as a mission, they were simply doing what had never been done for them: listen, encourage, believe. Jake, once withdrawn into silence, was no longer a man on the run. He had rebuilt its identity, not on the basis of its glorious past, but on what he brought to others every day, with patience and authenticity. He was no longer the hidden founder of Morrison Motors. He was Jake, the mechanic who also knew how to repair souls. Emily, on the other hand, was no longer the girl who hid behind cautious decisions or elegant escapes. She had found his own voice, its colors, its anchorage. She now exhibited her works in small galleries around the state, but it was here, between the oil and paint-stained walls, that she felt at home. Here, where art was not a performance, but a presence. They lived in Asmal wooden house, not far from the workshop, with a wild garden where sunflowers and lavender grew, and an old rocking chair given to them by a neighbor. Luxury no longer interested them. Their wealth was measured in other ways, in smiles exchanged, in silences included, in knowing glances after a long day. And sometimes, when the sky turned orange, they would climb onto the roof of the workshop, their secret place. Always they opened a beer or a thermos of tea, and looked at the stars. Without speaking. Because they now knew that the most beautiful truths are not said. They are experienced. They had found each other between two worlds, between the flashes of a forgotten past and the promises of a future they were building together. Between the grease of engines and blank canvases. Between shadow and light. And it is there, in this silent zone of truth, that they had discovered what few find in a lifetime: love, the real one.